Hey, you guys, it's me, Mr. Mini Guru here. For y'all that know me and that follow me on Instagram and Facebook, y'all know I usually do Excel videos where I explain different formulas, how to make spreadsheets, dashboards, things of that nature with Excel. I go over Microsoft Outlook and things of that nature, different Microsoft applications. Um, but I've started college now. I've been back to school now, and I'm actually going to be doing 2 videos a week here on YouTube with different things that I learn. I feel like that you never should stop learning, no matter what position it is that you're in, no matter where you are inside of your life. If you stop learning, then you put yourself in a roadblock. This week we're going to go over the basic communications in business communications, and I hope that you like it. Any questions at all that you need, that you have, just let me know at the end. If I didn't go over anything, just let me know as well. If everybody else that looks or watches my videos, y'all know I just kind of sort of wing this. I don't write anything down. I say how I feel at the time, and I explain what it is that I've written and why I wrote it. And so let's just go ahead and get into this. Next is going to be the overview of everything that it is that we're going to be going over inside this communication class. My overview page, this is just things that we will be going over with inside of this video. All of these will pertain to basics of communication. There are going to be different ways that each section is going to be showing different ways that communications affect you inside of the workplace, how to use communication effectively and professionally, because this is a business class, so you have to be able to communicate not only professionally but effectively. We're going to talk about the difference between active listening and passive listening. We're going to go over discussion questions. We're going to do a whole gamut of different things inside of this video to get deep into communication. Week one objectives. Read over these. I've obviously read over them. I'm not a teacher. I don't ever try to portray myself to be a teacher, but I do like to give people any knowledge that I know, and I like to share that knowledge. So I feel like that in this week that I've learned things about communication that I didn't previously know. So with these objectives, I hope that after looking at this video that you'll be able to answer these objectives in more than one or more than one way. After looking at this, we're going to go over different strong communication skills. We're going to go over nonverbal communications. We're going to go over some different types of cultural attitudes and ways that you can mitigate these cultural differences that you might have that you don't even realize that you have. We're gonna go over these different things as we go through this video. We're gonna talk about effective listening. We're gonna talk about how you can build up your listening skills. It's gonna go over a lot of information. Week one keywords. Um, I don't want anybody that's taking the class with me, to look at this and be like, oh, wait a minute, there weren't keywords in our inside of our syllabus or inside of us learning or anything. No, there aren't. In our class, there aren't any, I want to say, actual key words or vocabulary words or anything like that. But as I was reading the text and as I was searching online and as I was learning more about communication and the different ways of communication, I noticed that there were certain words that not only constantly came up, were very important. Things that the definitions of them you would need to know whether it's the actual Webster definition or whether it's a layman's term definition. I feel like they were very important in the class. And I'm going to read these. I wasn't really reading my slides before, but as I said, and I feel like these are important. The first one is professionalism. We're going to go over the definition of professionalism. Communication. We're going to go over the definition of communication. Active and passive listening. We're going to go over active passive listening, nonverbal communication, and we're going to go over culture. One questions, or as I said before, discussion questions, discussion posts. Um, I would encourage you to read through these and answer them yourself because I noticed as I was answering them that it was forcing me almost to give myself a more than one way to define communication. Um, I'm gonna read the very first question. It's in your own words, define communication. So in my own words, I had to define what it is that I thought that it means to communicate with somebody. And when originally going over this class and making that definition, um, I didn't realize that communication is more deep, is way deeper than just talking to somebody. There's when you communicate with somebody, it's more than just you talking. Somebody has to be listening. The cycle of communication has to be completed in order for communication in order to happen. The next part of it is why it's so important to effectively communicate in the workplace. These questions, this first discussion question, is a lot of personal questions. It makes it so that instead of you going to the textbook or you going online and you being able to find the answer to these questions, you have to take a look inward. You have to realize, hey, how is communication affecting me? And the only way for you to really understand how communication affects you and impacts you is by actually understanding what communication is, what it actually means to communicate. And as I said previously, over and over again, that is what we're going to go over. Okay, so now we're into communication. We're into the first part of the discussion post. Okay, the very the very bones of this week, the basic of communication. So the way that I defined communication was a way for all living organisms to convey emotions, thoughts, and intentions. I came up with this um, definition because in the past life, well, I previously went to school for chemistry, and so all living things have to communicate some way, form, or fashion in order for anything to happen. So I didn't, at the time of giving this definition and being the fact that it was in my own words, I looked at it as in like everything has to communicate. I didn't want to limit it to just people. Animals communicate, microorganisms communicate. Anything that's living has to have find a way of communicating. What do we do when we communicate? We're trying to get something else. I don't even want to say a person, something else to understand what our emotions are, to understand what our thoughts are. And I put that intentions there. We haven't went over yet, but for that non-verbal communication, because communicating non-verbally, you can get across emotions, thoughts, and intentions without even saying anything. So as we go into it and we think more about communication, we understand that this skill is very important. It needs to be mastered in the workplace. Regular tasks cannot be completed without communication. This is something that we, as a society, as humans, we know, excuse me, that we have to communicate in order for anything to get done. Even before language was a thing, communication was still a thing. Now, as we look inside of this class, this business class, we realize that without effective communication, problem solving, teamwork, learning, and a multitude of other tasks and functions just couldn't take place. Like I was saying before, you can communicate, but it's effective communication that is important. And in my job as an analyst, effective communication is extremely important because I don't have a lot of contact with people face to face a lot, and I do a lot of reports. So my professionalism in my communication, using nonverbal, using emails, using social platforms in order to be able to get my point across, is very important that I understand how I'm conveying my thoughts and my emotion and my intentions through the communication of this nonverbal communication that I use. That's how important communication is. We've, I want to say, scratched the surface of what communication is. Let's dig a little bit deeper. This is a business course, so we need to figure out what is professionalism, because you can't have professional communication. You can have effective communication. You can't communicate in the business world without understanding what professionalism and without professionalism is. I apologize, or without being professional. So professionalism is worthy of or appropriate to a professional person. I apologize. Competent, skillful, or assured. So when I saw this definition, I wanted so bad to go and look at a layman's definition. I wanted to look at something that's like, okay, let's just break this down a little bit more. Let's see a simpler version of this definition. But the tail end of this definition gives me everything that I need. It's competent, skillful, and assured. When you communicate with somebody professionally, especially verbally, you have to understand that the things that you're saying and how you say them is like first impressions. If you don't say things in complete sentences, when you don't use proper English, when you use ebonics, it's not speaking in a professional manner. And so then what that does is that reduces the amount of skill that somebody thinks that you have. You're not, your reliability is being reduced. When you work for a company and if you can't complete simple tasks when it comes to communication, when you can't communicate effectively, it your reliability has been shot. Um, Professional communication, is competent communication. When writing an email, speaking on the phone, or face-to-face communication, having confidence in your words and your ability gives others around you that same level of confidence. That is very important. That is very important. You have to be professional, but you have to be confident and competent. On the same token, you can't be too competent, too confident, or too skillful to the point where you end up being unprofessional. A lot of time, unprofessionalism happens without you even realizing that it is happening. People become bullied and berated and others because of other people's lack of professionalism. One thing that I always like to say is the actions of others shouldn't dictate the actions of yourself. And I say that in communication is because when that communication when that communication cycle is not complete, your intentions, your emotions can be conveyed incorrectly. And what happens is this become unprofessional. The professionalism has been lost now. And then in retaliation, you could become unprofessional without realizing it. Or you could be the person that is being unprofessional without realizing that you're being unprofessional just because of your lack of communication. In communication, when we're using nonverbal communication, when we're using writing communication, we're in social media communication nowadays, because nowadays a lot of things aren't face to face, and it's really hard to convey a tone over a text message or over email. So it's very important that when you're writing things, you don't use profanity. You don't use any kind of derogatory words. When you're writing somebody, you have to understand the tone in which it is that you're transmitting any kind of communication, especially nonverbal, especially when it comes to professionalism. Now, this slide is very important to me. Effective listening. So there's going to be a mixture between me reading a lot of it and me giving you personal experiences because um, listening is an extremely important part of communication. Without effectively listening to the person that's trying to communicate with you, there's no way the communication can happen. So what is effective listening? So effective listening is actively absorbing the information given to you by the speaker. Show that you're listening, interested, and provide feedback to the speaker so that he or she knows the message is received. I see it a lot in the corporate environment. People of higher in at a higher rank. I was military, so it's hard for me to think of a different way to put it. But people that have a higher title, they they tend to not realize a lot of times that they're not using effective listening to their employees. When a lot of things arrive inside of the work environment, a lot of things, even in your home environment, we have to sometimes stop doing what we're doing and we have to pay attention to what it is that the person is trying to communicate with us. Because without effective listening, you can't communicate effectively. And if you can't communicate effectively, there's no ways you can have teamwork with inside of your company. Um, when you have employees that make complaints, when you have employees that have concerns, when you have people that are of the same status or job title as you, when you have friends or family that have issues, if you don't have effective listening, if you don't have active listening where you're engaged into the conversation, then communication is lacking. When people are talking to you, just hearing somebody is not listening to them. Letting them vent is not listening. When you listen to somebody, when you actively listen to somebody, you become part. I want to say, the way I interpret it is you become part of whatever story is they're saying. You become completely immersed in it to the point where you're engaged. You're trying to resolve that problem. You're not trying to ignore that problem for another day. And I see this so much where effective listening is almost put to the back burner because it's almost as if it's not as important as regular communication, but you can't communicate without actively listening. Nonverbal communication. What is nonverbal communication? Where do you see this in the workplace and how does it impact communication? I'm not going to touch on nonverbal communication too much, only because I have touched on it previously. But I want to give a different perspective on nonverbal communication. First, I'm going to give the definition. So, nonverbal communication refers to gestures, facial expressions, tone of voice, eye contact, or lack thereof, body language, posture, and other ways people can communicate without using language. I'm going to just read what it is that I wrote. This is, do what you love and love what you do. Body language, facial expression, native emotions will tell more about your day than any words you can use to describe it. Communication is not written or spoken most times. The first time you ever communicated with someone, it was without you saying a word. When you have a negative tone in your voice or an aggressive posture, these can cause a hostile work environment. I spoke about nonverbal communication when it came to writing emails and using like different type of social platforms. But when walking around in your regular life, going to Walmart, coming home from work, going to work, nonverbal communication, it stands out way more than verbal. When you walk inside of work on a Monday morning and you've had a long weekend and it was bad, when you don't leave those problems at the door and when you carry that stress and you carry that weight on you, those non-verbal cues, they become absorbed by those active listeners that are there at your job. Those active listeners are listening. They're looking at your body language. They're looking at all these nonverbal cues that you're giving off, and that's gonna set the mood for the work environment. Um, so it's very important if you're in a job, if you're in a relationship, or if you're in any kind of situation, understand that you might not realize that you might be acting unprofessionally, or you might not realize that you're unhappy, or you might not realize that things are bothering you. But your facial expressions, your body, your outward appearance, it 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 speaks louder than any words you can ever use to describe how you're feeling. What is culture? How does culture interact with communication? How does culture impact the marketplace? And how can we effectively communicate with others based on cultural interactions? So this was a very new thing to me. And as I read through the chapter, and as I said, the in my works cited section, it references where I got my information from. But I just wanted to kind of just touch a little bit or kind of on what this cultural communication was. So with me working in the logistics field, I do work with different types of cultures. And I didn't realize that how I didn't realize the level of effect that people's culture actually have on a business. So as I was reading through the chapter, one thing that stuck out to me were the difference between high and low context cultures, and how some look at more nonverbal cues and others look at more verbal cues. It gave a good example inside of the book that I'm reading now about basics of communications, where um, like a low context culture would look more at the verbal cues that you have, where if you say yes, they hear yes and you mean yes. Whereas more of a high context culture would be you say yes, but then they also look at the setting, the background. They also look at how your body language is. And it's just so amazing to realize that the words coming out of your mouth more than half the time is not the way that every culture understands communication. Scenario. I'm not going to read it. I hope you read it and go over it. It's a company that I made up. I'm not Spanish, so here's my best interpretation of how to say it. It's Jesus Lagarto Logistics. And I came up with this name because I was watching YouTube one day, and this thing called a Jesus lizard was running on water. And so I thought, how neat would it be to have a logistical company that runs OTR or on the road services and vessel services from to different countries named Jesus Lizard, a lizard that can run both on the ground and on water. So I used that premises to create a company based off of. And this company, I'm basically giving a brief presentation of my role in the marketplace with this company. Read it. I really liked it. I did a little bit of research as far as some major highways when it comes into to South Africa, as far as the major port that's inside of South Africa, in order to be able to be as all kind of authentic as possible. I didn't want anybody to think that it was 100% true. That's why I gave it a Spanish name. You know, but I hope you like it. I gave a reason behind the scenario, um, and how it deals and how it connects with communication. You was able to learn something from this, even if it was a refresher, even if it was something that you already knew, but it was more reinforced. But I hope that something was able to be gotten out of this. I learned a lot about communication just in this short amount of time. And like I said, I like to just be able to share anything that I learned that is new. Well, with me, I feel like learning never stops. If you feel like that you learned everything that you'll ever learn in life, then you've put it yourself into a roadblock. Um, Mr. Mini Guru here. I do a video all the time. I'm gonna do two every week now. They have a YouTube platform now, and you can follow me on Instagram. You can also follow me on Facebook, where I have Excel videos, and I show you different ways to manipulate formulas. Showing you different backgrounds. I'm sorry, back loops to Microsoft Outlook, different things of that nature. And I always take questions and inspirations for different videos.